Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Rarely Typical, a podcast where I am talking about living life with a rare disease, finding hope, and living a life that is rarely typical. My name is Sherry Langan, and if you are new here, I am a pulmonary arterial hypertension and congestive heart failure patient advocate. And today I want to have a little discussion about my clinical trial experience. So, what is a clinical trial? The last podcast episode that I had, if you did not listen to it, I suggest you go back and listen to it. I had an episode with my current doctor, Dr. Moss, and we chatted about what clinical trial was, is, and how it functions in a clinical capacity. Today, I'm going to talk about my experience in a clinical trial. Last time we talked about the logistics of a clinical trial, and I want to get into the nitty gritty of how my clinical trial experience has gone. And hopefully, if you are considering a clinical trial, then this would push you over the edge and say, yes, I want to try it out. A clinical trial is a trial in which they are testing a new medication and in patients, like in actual real life patients. There are different phases of trial, phases 1, 2, 3. There are different subsets for the trial, types of patients that they're testing it on, ages, types of disease. There are a lot of intricacies when it comes to clinical trial and what that means. But for the most part, the general idea is that they are testing a new drug on the market. They are testing it for the FDA to say, hey, this is a clinical trial. We have done this research and we find that it is beneficial to the patients. And then when they're done with the clinical trial phase, they can apply to get it approved so they can go on the market. The clinical trial that I am on is called Sotatercept. The Sotatercept trial is a long-term phase, so a part, 3 phase of the Sotatercept clinical trial. If you are new here, pulmonary arterial hypertension is a very rare disease. It's a very specific disease that deals with the pulmonary arteries in the heart and lungs. Those arteries get constricted, and because of that constriction, it causes heart failure as a secondary condition. Pulmonary hypertension is a broad term, and then underneath pulmonary hypertension is pulmonary arterial hypertension. There are different types of pulmonary hypertension. There's pulmonary hypertension that's caused by left-sided heart disease, right-sided heart disease, hereditary diseases. Pulmonary hypertension can also be caused as a secondary condition to other diseases such as scleroderma or CTEPH. Pulmonary hypertension is very complicated, for lack of a better word. There tends to be a lot of confusion around whether pulmonary hypertension is the same as hypertension. Hypertension is completely different. So when you go to the doctor and they check your blood pressure, hypertension is not the same as pulmonary arterial hypertension. Pulmonary arterial hypertension is a disease that starts in the lungs, hence the word pulmonary. And so because of pulmonary hypertension being such a rare disease, there's not a lot of medications on the market. There are more medications now than there were when I was diagnosed. However, when pulmonary arterial hypertension started, there were very few amounts of medications that were made for pulmonary hypertension patients. Pulmonary arterial hypertension is so specific that there has not been a trial for a long time that was as exciting as the one that I'm currently on. So I'm on the Sotatercept long-term phase. I started the Sotatercept clinical trial on the Stellar study, and the Stellar study was a clinical trial that was a double blind. And that means that neither I nor my doctor knew whether or not I was getting the drug. When I was originally approached for this clinical trial, I remember it a little differently than Moss does, but I remember hearing about this Sotatercept medication in its creation. I did a marketing study for a company, and they talked about this drug. They talked about the benefits that it could possibly have for the PAH community. And I was so excited. And I didn't know what it was because it was a unbranded marketing research opportunity. So when I heard about it, I then went to social media, obviously, and I found a girl who is one of my friends Shanna was on a clinical trial for a different medication. And I remember that she was on a clinical trial, and I thought, oh, that would be really cool to be on a clinical trial for this medicine that I just heard about. And I talked to my friend Chelsea about it, and I called Chelsea and I said, there's this drug on the market. It is supposed to be super exciting, and it is supposed to have all these great benefits. And we both cried. We thought, like, how amazing would it be if this drug could do the things that they're claiming that it does? And honestly, at the time, I just remember thinking, like, this is a life-changing medication. If I am offered the chance for a clinical trial, I would absolutely take it. Fast forward, I went to clinic. I was in clinic with Moss, and he mentioned a trial. And I said, hey, I'd heard about this trial. Is this the trial that you're talking about? And he said, yeah, we're still looking at it. We haven't decided if we're going to take it or not. And I said, if you and B are deciding to take this trial, I want to be on it. And he took that nugget and he held on to it. And then not too long later, B came back and said, yeah, I think this is a trial that could be very beneficial, and we are going to try and get it at Mayo. They got the trial to come to clinic, and they called me. They said, hey, are you interested in being on this trial? And I said, yes, absolutely. Let's get it started. I called H. I said, hey, like, this is the trial. He said, yes, I've heard very good things about it. I highly suggest you do it if you get the opportunity. So fast forward a few weeks, they were trying to get me scheduled to get on this trial. And what I remember is I was like, hey, we need to get in on this trial. I want to get started as soon as possible. I want to start it next week. And they're like, we don't know if we can get you in next week. You just were here a couple weeks ago. And I said, listen, I want to get in on this trial. If we're going to do it, I just want to go ahead and get it all done. I was able to make it work with my husband. I was able to make our schedule work. And I said, hey, I just really want to push and just get started on all this paperwork. So they brought me in. I signed all the paperwork. I went in for my first day of testing. It was 2 days of testing. And they came back and they said, hey, just so you know, like, you're going to have a second heart cath. You just had a heart cath not even 6 weeks ago. Are you willing to do this to be in this trial? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's freaking do it. And Moss was like, are you sure? We just did a heart cath. It was literally just a few weeks ago. If you don't want to do it, I understand. And I said, no, I want to be in this trial. I want to do it. So we started the testing. And then the next day I get a phone call from the clinical trial coordinator. And she said, I just wanted to let you know they actually just closed the enrollment for this trial. And had we not started your stuff when you wanted, you would have missed it. And I remember Moss and Berger were like, we were so nervous that you were going to get on it, because when we heard that they closed it, we looked to make sure that you had gotten in before they closed it, because we did not want to have to deal with the repercussions of you not getting in on this. And so I was one of the last patients. I think they took 400 patients. And we joke all the time, I probably was like number 399, because they closed it the day after I started. And there was another patient in our clinic who was just getting ready to go in for her testing and did not make it because they closed the trial. So they had me come in. I did all of the testing again. I did a second heart cath. We already knew what it was going to say, so there was no anxiousness or anything about that. My heart caths are pretty quick because Moss does them himself, and I'm very thankful for that. I don't have to go to a cath lab. So he does them on his own schedule. He does them himself. I don't have to wait for results. So we had already known what the results were going to be because I had just been there. But we did the heart cath. We got all the testing done, and then I started on drug. When I say I started on drug, let's not forget that I was on a double blind. So I started on the drug, and I did 6 months of blind study. And for 6 months, I was getting this injection. I had no idea if it was a medicine. We were looking at the numbers, we were looking at the testing and trying to discern whether or not I was actually getting medication. And turns out I was not. We're pretty sure I was on the placebo. All of my testing pretty much stayed the same. It didn't really look like anything was changing. There was no up and down movement. Maybe once or twice we thought, oh, maybe she's getting drugged, but then we really didn't know. So I was driving back and forth to clinic every 3 weeks, which was a literal disaster. It was so much effort. because my husband was working and we have kids and I'm driving back and forth to clinic. I have to do the injection in clinic. I'm in clinic for hours at a time every time I go. And it was just really taxing, I think. I was exhausted driving back and forth. And about 6 months in, I got told by the clinical trial coordinator that I would be able to move to at-home injection. And this was a complete and utter disaster. I was told that I could get at-home injections. So after the 6 months happened, they decided that, okay, it's been the appropriate amount of time. Like the trial says that you can get at-home injections. So we will schedule that. Well, then the day of clinical trial injection came. They had it scheduled out. There was a nurse that was going to fly in, drive an hour from the Orlando airport, come to my house, give me this injection. She was going to take the injection medication, hand it off to a courier that would take the trash of this trial medicine and take it back to clinic so that it could be disposed of. So let me break that down again. They had to drive the medicine to me. A nurse had to drive to me. They had to drop the medicine off. Then she would stay here, mix the medicine, give me the injection, and then somebody else would come, pick up the box of supplies, take it back to clinic. And that's how I was going to get this at-home injection. And so the day of injection comes and this nurse shows up and there's no medicine. And when I tell you, I remember thinking, I thought they said they were going to send the medicine, but maybe she was bringing the medicine. So this nurse shows up to the house and I'm like, I don't have medicine. Do you have the medicine? And she's like, I don't have the medicine. I thought the medicine was going to be delivered. And so I call my coordinator and I'm like, hey, the nurse is here, but the medicine's not here. And she's like, oh, wait, what? And she's like, let me look. And so she calls the courier that was supposed to bring it from Jacksonville to our house. And she was like, well, the courier got delayed. It'll be a few hours. And we're like, okay. So then this nurse is like, I'm going to go eat lunch. I'll come back when the medicine gets here. So she leaves and the medicine doesn't show up. So she comes back and I'm like, the medicine's not here yet. And she's like, what? And so she calls the coordinator and the coordinator is like, yeah, sorry, I think something happened and the medicine just did not get picked up. And so the nurse is like, okay, so what do you want me to do? And then in the middle of her having this conversation with the coordinator, the guy who was supposed to pick up the medicine supplies and take it back to clinic shows up. So everybody's here, but the medicine itself is not here. And so the guy that comes is like, are you guys done? Is there something for me to pick up? And we're like, no, there's no medicine here. And he's like, okay, well, I got other stuff to do, so I'm leaving. So he left. And so the nurse is still on the phone with the coordinator, trying to figure it out. She's like, listen, I have to fly across the country to give a different injection and I cannot stay here. And so they're like, okay, it's fine. We will try again next week. And so she leaves. She drives back to the airport, gets on a plane and flies wherever she was going, which was crazy that they flew her in just to give me this injection. And then she didn't give me the injection. She had to leave and go somewhere else. So the next week happens and same thing is supposed to happen. Somebody is supposed to drive the drug from Jacksonville to here, drop it off. She's supposed to come, give me the injection, and then somebody comes and picks up the supplies and takes it back to Jacksonville. The day of the injection, same thing happens. She shows up. There is no medicine. And she's like, you've got to be kidding me. And she had just flown overnight from, I don't know, Arizona or Michigan or something. And she was like, I am exhausted. They were supposed to bring the drug. So she calls, she says, hey, where's this drug? The coordinator is like, I have no idea. And we're like, listen, girl, you got one job. Your job is to get the medicine here because everybody else is here. And she is like, I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry. Let me call them. She calls them. She calls us back and she's like, hey, the medicine is actually sitting on a plane or sitting on a runway or something, and it's not in the proper cooler or something. And we were like, what does that mean? And she said, well, it's supposed to be refrigerated. And if it's not refrigerated or cold, then we can't give it to you. So it's been sitting out and now I can't give it to you. So we're just going to have to scrap this all together. And this nurse loses it. And honestly, I don't blame her. She had flown across the country to be there to give me this injection. She had driven all the way here. And she was like, you cannot keep doing this. I have other patients I need to see. I'm making this trip for no reason. You are not doing things properly. It should not be that difficult to bring a delivery from Jacksonville to here, drop it off, and so I can give this girl this injection. And the coordinator's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And we're just like, we don't care if you're sorry. There just should be medicine. This is ridiculous. And I think for me, I was most frustrated because I said this in a clinical trial talk a different time, but the technology that we are in, it should be so easy to be able to track medication. I am able to order something on Uber Eats, watch it, be prepared at this restaurant, watch it, go into the car, watch and track the car until it gets dropped off at my house, and then get my food while it's still hot delivered to my door. The fact that I can do that on Uber Eats from a restaurant and I can't track life-sustaining medication from a clinical trial that people are paying lots of money for is insane. The fact that we're not using the technology that's already out there is also absolutely crazy to me, because it should not be this difficult. It should have just been, we get it from the pharmacy, we put it in a cooler, we drive it here, we drop it off, end of story. But it was just not like that. And it was just one of those conversations where I was like, I cannot believe that we're having to deal with this. But I was so frustrated with this specific coordinator, because this is your job, girl. And I get it. You have lots of patients, you have lots of things, you wear a lot of hats, blah, 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 blah. But you had one job, and it was to coordinate the medication that I'm on trial for. As a coordinator for a medication in a trial, I am confused why you were not able to do your job properly. And in that same regard, this is considered life-sustaining medication. We don't know if I'm on drug or not. So now I've missed a dose. I've actually missed more than one dose at this point, because you were not able to get your ducks in a row. And you don't have much more to do other than to make sure that stupid medicine gets in that car and drives here. And I was so frustrated and I was so mad. And I think I'm positive. Actually, I don't know. I know I yelled at this girl, and I yelled at her because I was just like, you are playing with someone's life. If I am getting medicine, and at this point, we did not know if I was getting the medicine. If I am getting the medicine and I'm not getting the medicine that I'm supposed to be getting, there would be a freaking lawsuit on your hands if this were normal everyday practice. You should be able to coordinate the delivery of a drug. And if you cannot do that, if you are unable, if Mayo is unable to get this medication delivered, it should not have been promised to me. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. She was like, can you come in tomorrow? And I'm like, listen, girl, I got a life. I got children. I got a husband. I literally drop 2.5 hours to clinic and 2.5 hours back. I cannot just drop everything and drive up there tomorrow. It's just not possible. And we schedule my appointments months in advance so that I can plan around these things. You cannot just ask me because you messed up to turn around and drive up there because you didn't do your job properly. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. I was so frustrated because this poor nurse has flown out here twice. And on the third one, she was like, just can't do it. And at the end of the day, they actually decided that it was just not going to work. So they ended up not giving me at-home injections at all. I got 0 at-home injections, which was super fun. And then fast forward. So, right, all of these things happen. I am no longer getting this delivery at-home medicine that they had promised. And I am so annoyed, but it's fine. It was just easier at this point to just drive to clinic every 3 weeks and just get the injection done. So I moved from the double-blind short-term phase of trial, and I moved to long-term phase, which I'm at now in, which is called Sotatercept. So the Soteria clinical trial long-term phase that I'm in moved it from a double-blind to an open label study. And what that means is that everybody in the trial now on the long-term phase is getting the drug. So the second I got the injection, we started tracking everything. I mean, not that we weren't tracking everything already, but we were really looking at it, knowing now that I'm getting the medication. So I start the long-term phase. I am on the long-term phase for 3 or 4 months before I had my first echo and my first heart cath. And I was so nervous, but I did immediately start feeling better. And what's so amazing about this medication is that it's a remodeling agent. It's supposed to remodel all of these damaged vessels or something. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a pharmacist, and I'm definitely not a clinical trial expert. So I think that's what it does. Anyway, for the most part, I started feeling better. We went in for my test results. Me and 2 of my best friends went up to clinic. We waited for my test results, and the very first test result that came back was that I went from heart failure, BNP, I'm in severe heart failure, to my number was 11. And when I tell you I cried, I sobbed. Like, I was beyond words, so excited, so thankful. This medication works. I'm in it right now, and it works. And it was like, honestly, such a godsend. We found out that all of my results were good. Everything looked better. I went from severe heart failure to no heart failure. I went from severe pulmonary hypertension to mild to moderate pulmonary hypertension. And we have seen my numbers just get better and better. And I'm so thankful. There has been so much back and forth when it comes to side effects and current treatments and what we're going to be doing. And I get a lot of questions about what I'm doing now that my numbers look different. So I did lower my pump dose a little bit. I was having a lot of flushing and headaches and diarrhea and all of those fun things. The symptoms were just really exacerbated. And it's funny because the symptoms list for the clinical trial drug for the Sotatercept, which is also called Winrevair now that it's on the market, it's originally called Sotatercept. So the Sotatercept symptoms are the exact same as all of my other PH medications. So, jaw pain, headaches, flushing, diarrhea, all of those things. So I started seeing those symptoms exacerbated, and it comes into clinical discussion, right? About whether or not, because I'm getting this medicine, everything's exacerbated because I'm getting double the symptoms, or is it because I'm getting better and it's exacerbating the Remodulin side effects, which are also this exact same. And so I genuinely got better, but then I was miserable because I was spending all of my time in the bathroom. And so we made a decision that we would lower my dose just a little bit. So we lowered it a little bit and it got better. And then all of the symptoms came back. And so we lowered it again and it got better. And we have stayed the course because my numbers are still elevated. They're not perfect, obviously, because this is a forever disease, but I definitely am. I'm feeling better. All of my numbers look better. And I was just trying to relieve the symptoms more so than trying to get off pump. Obviously, the goal would be to get off pump at some point. And there are people on this drug who have been able to come off their pumps. But I was on such a high dose that coming off pump, honestly, doesn't really seem realistic. It's possible that I could switch to an oral medicine now. But when I was on the oral medication of the Remodulin, which is called Orenitram, I was so sick. And I did that and it really sucked. And my quality of life was terrible. And we have talked about it, but like, I am honestly not willing to do all of the stuff that came with the oral medicine. So I've just stayed on the pump. So we have stayed on the same dose for the last, year almost. And it's been okay. I do feel like my symptoms are still crazy, but they're definitely much more manageable now. My numbers at my most recent echo last week looked so good. Moss said that it was the best echo ever, which we were so thankful for. I would be lying if I said clinical trial has not had its hiccups. Besides the delivery thing, at one point, if you've been following me for a while, if you've seen it on my Instagram or my TikTok, I had a really terrible experience with a different coordinator who had me sit in a room for over 6 hours waiting on my medication, which is as easy as pulling it out of the refrigerator and then handing it to me so that I can mix it and inject it myself. and I waited for 6 hours. I was hysterical. I am not being told why I'm here. I'm not being told how much longer it's going to take. All I'm told is that there was an issue with pharmacy and I had not eaten all day. I'd been there since like 6 a.m. and I was so frustrated. I thought I was going to get home in time for my kid's baseball game. And I ended up staying at the hospital all day without any communication as to why. I called every head of department, every clinical trial person I could talk to. There was a full investigation that went into what happened. I was so upset. I went for everybody's throat because I was so mad. I had sat there for 6 hours without any explanation as to why. There was a different clinical trial patient that came in. I watched her come in and I watched her leave before I did. I did not understand why I was still sitting there when I was there first. And I hate feeling like I was being looked over, and I cried and I was so upset and I was like emotionally drained. I got apologies from everyone, but I went for the jugular. And so I would be lying if I said clinical trial has been a complete breeze. It has been very emotionally taxing. It's been physically taxing, having to drive back and forth. Currently, my hemoglobin is too high to get proper at-home injections. If my hemoglobin is within a certain range, I'm able to get 12 weeks, so 3 home kits. But because my hemoglobin is a 0.6 above what the clinical trial standard is, I have to drive up there every other time. So I'm getting 1 at-home kit and I'm driving up there every 6 weeks, which is so annoying because in March of 2025, the Sotatercept, the Winrevair, was made commercially available. And so now everybody has access to it. You get it through specialty pharmacy. It gets delivered just like every other medicine. It comes and you can do it at home. But I'm still being told because of this hemoglobin thing, I still have to drive to clinic. I cannot be mad because it's really nice that they're keeping really close track of my numbers and everything. I'm never going to be mad when I'm getting a lot of FaceTime with my doctors. I'm getting a lot of care, for lack of a better term. I'm getting a lot of extra care that I wouldn't be getting if I wasn't on clinical trial. But it is very taxing. It's very exhausting. And it's just a lot in general. I have to find somebody to watch the kids. I have to make sure my husband's home or somebody can pick them up and take care of them. Sometimes I have to be there at 7 or 8 in the morning. That means I have to leave here at like 4 or 5 in the morning. So it becomes just a cluster of a day if I have to drive up there all the time. So I would be lying if I said clinical trial was easy, but has it been worth it? Absolutely. My numbers are better than they've ever been. I have never felt more normal. I am so thankful. And something that I have talked about a lot is that I have always prayed for healing. I've prayed that God would give me healing on earth. And I think in my head, I've always imagined that healing would look like, boom, I'm healed, no more pulmonary hypertension. But something that I have found in this season of clinical trial and walking through all of this in my faith is that healing doesn't always look like what we imagine it to be. Healing does not always look like, boom, healing. Sometimes it looks like medicine. Sometimes healing looks like normal when you've always been severe. Sometimes healing is that you get healing when you die and go to heaven. And have had a really hard time overcoming what my head says healing is. But I've also been so thankful that I have gotten to see what healing could look like here when it comes to medication. I'm so thankful for the doctors. I'm so thankful for the clinical trial team. I'm thankful for the pharmaceutical company who has come up with this medicine, the researchers that have put their hearts on the line for this. I am so thankful. This clinical trial has been life-changing. It should not be a last resort. When I went into clinical trial, I originally thought, is this it? Is this all I have left? And it has been so rewarding. It has been so taxing, but also it's been so rewarding. And I've been so honored to get to walk through this and be on the trial and see the medication that's changing people's lives. I know that not everybody has these results and that some people have had to come off of this drug and it's not working as well in some people. But my story and my experience has been that it's been life-changing. And would I do another clinical trial? I don't know. Moss asked me when I was there last week if I would consider doing a different one. Yeah, probably. I, for the most part, have had a really good experience. There have definitely been hiccups, but with anything, learning curve, there's always hiccups. But I have been so thankful with the way that this medicine has worked for me that it's given me years and years back on my life. And the goal is to feel normal. The goal is to get more time. And right now, that's what this drug is giving me. So, clinical trial at the end of the day, I think has been worth it. It's been a lot, but it's definitely been worth it. So, if you are nervous about clinical trial, if you're nervous about putting yourself out there, I would weigh all your options, talk to your friends in your disease space, get opinions, get lots and lots of opinions and make an informed decision. My doctors and I talked about it. My PH friends and I talked about it. My husband and I talked about it. We've adjusted our life around this clinical trial and it comes to a close next year. And does that mean I jump into another clinical trial? I don't know. Maybe. We will see what it looks like. But for the most part, clinical trial has been life-changing. And I'm so thankful that I've gotten to walk through this. Sometimes healing doesn't look like what we imagine it to be. Sometimes healing is clinical trials. And sometimes healing might look different, but it doesn't mean that it's not sweet. So I'm so thankful for you guys for listening. I hope that this was helpful. I tried to give you as much detail as I could remember. It's been such a long process, but thanks for being here, guys. And next week, I think it's my last episode for this season. I'm doing 10 episodes a season. And when I come back for season 3, there will be a lot more to talk about. So talk to you guys later.